I guess it is. Yeah, it's Wednesday. Yeah, so here we are. Just want to double check that we've got sound, that you can hear what's going on. So just somebody let me know in the comments if you can hear anything or everything or any of that stuff. And yeah, today we are gonna go over a whole bunch of stuff. We're gonna go through studio setup. Let's see, what else? Studio setup. Gonna go through new modular rig, which is what you see right here, this whole big monster, and a little bit about how it's working and why it's working and why it even exists and why I kind of put this thing together. I've been getting a ton of questions about the Digitakt 2 and how it is and what it is and why it's different, and should it replace the syntax, should it replace the rhythm, is it better than this, is it better than that? So we're gonna talk a whole bunch about that because I know a lot of people have opinions on it, as do I, and we'll chat about it. So if you've got any questions, definitely post those up in the chat. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the OXI One and how I'm using that. So we've got a whole bunch of things that we're going to talk about, but first and foremost, this is kind of all about the whole purpose for this space, and everything that you're looking at here is production. So we're going to talk a little bit more about production than we normally do. Usually on these chats, we spend a lot of time talking about live performance, which we'll definitely have a bunch more videos and streams about that coming up. But this one is going to be a bit more about production, but also how that relates to live performance, how live performance influences production, and how production influences live performance. There we go. Take that audio off there. Scooting around in the room a little bit. Yeah, so welcome everybody. So a few of you out there. So hey, Wabbit, we should talk about, you just got a Digitakt I saw on your stream. So we'll talk a little bit about Digitakt today, now that you've gotten sucked into the world of Elektron. Let's see, James, hey, what's going on? Good evening from the UK. Good evening. Anyone else try out the Battering Ram? Yeah, we can talk a little bit about the Battering Ram, which is right here in my setup. My new favorite drum sound, and we can talk a bit about why. And yeah, let's see here. Cool. Oh, you can hear the voice, which is a good thing. Let's see if you can hear any music. So, can you hear the modular? Let me know in the comments if you hear any of that music playing in the background. So we put a little kick drum in there. And see how the volume level is on that. Let me know if you hear that, and if you do, how the volume is. Yeah, so should be correct. Awesome. Yes, good. Yeah, it's I've had a whole bunch of different things getting the studio set up and working for live stream, working for group coaching calls, working for one-on-one coaching calls. Shout out to one of my coaching students, Thomas, who helped me out with Loopback. I don't know if you guys have ever used Loopback. I'm not using it now with the stream because I have a different way to go into these cameras, but it's great for Zoom, which I've been having issues trying to get the quality of the music into one-on-one calls along with voice and synced with camera and all that stuff. Okay, music is a tad quiet. I can fix that as well. Add a little bit of volume there. And let's see if I go into, yeah, that should be okie dokie. Cool, cool. Awesome. Who else is here? Oh, hey, Ed. What's going on? Ed's going to recognize a few of his modules in this setup because we did a trade this last 2 weeks ago now, to get some of those in here, and we'll walk through a little bit about how this is set up and why I kind of set it up the way I did, and yeah, what it's designed to do. So yeah, why don't we start off with that? First and foremost, we can start off a little bit with the setup. Let me switch views here so you can see a little bit of a wider view, kind of an overhead. So you can see we've got Modular here, a couple of Elektron boxes here, and then a rack with kind of my favorite synths, drum machines, and then an Ableton Push 3, which is controlling Ableton that's in the computer, which is right over there. I think in this view you can probably see the computer just behind, and yeah, you can see my little software for live streaming here. But yeah, that's the setup. So there's other stuff in the room, but I wanted to put everything that I kind of use and prefer using, and all of that stuff for production, all kind of within reach in one spot. So I have this corner set up, and I wanted to get it intentionally away from the computer screen, which the computer screen's over there. So I can still get in there and do things in Ableton when I want to, but I wanted to be able to kind of move away from that and be able to really focus on the instruments and creating music with the instruments rather than point and click mouse stuff. So that's why I kind of moved everything this way. The Push 3 is kind of acting in controller mode right now so that I can control everything that's in Ableton on the screen. So that way I've got things like levels, or if I want to add a device, or if I've got something like that, I can do that kind of simple stuff here, because the way that I work production-wise is in the clip mode, the live mode. If you guys have used Ableton Live, I don't know if you are or aren't Ableton users, but in the mode where I can kind of create pieces and parts of songs, and then I can arrange them out later. I also like being able to create pieces and parts of songs and then perform them into the arrangement mode, the arrangement view of Ableton. And so that way I can kind of get a live performance vibe in a production, rather than having it be all kind of like blocked out and moved around with the mouse and point and click and that kind of stuff. That said, the biggest addition to this, which the other gear was was all kind of part of the live performance stuff and the production stuff, but there's obviously expanded modular case here, which I wanted to talk quite a bit about because it's the new addition, and there's some different reasons why it exists, and how it's kind of set up, and kind of go through that just a little bit. So the main reason for the modular setup is I was using modular in performances and using it in production, but they weren't really kind of set up the same way. Live performance modular was set up very much to be small, portable, get a lot out of a very few voices, and the maximum amount possible out of the small amount of space that I could still carry with me to travel to shows. With this setup, I wanted to be able to expand things a bit, to be able to really do some more interesting and creative sound design, and not kind of be limited to what the individual voices could do themselves. If you're a modular person, you probably noticed in my live set, basically I have all self-contained voices. So some of them I moved over here for now. So like the Bastel Pizza, the BIA, things like that, the OXI Choral, they are all voices that have envelopes built in. They've got filters oftentimes, some do, some don't. These do not have filters, but like the OXI Choral has a filter built in. So they're basically a whole synth voice just in a really small amount of space, which is great. but it kind of goes back to the whole thing of hardware, where the beautiful thing about modular is you're not limited to the way the hardware was designed. You're not limited to the way the individual designer said, okay, I think this filter would sound best with this type of envelope, with this type of oscillator. With modular, you can mix and match. And I don't really have my performance case set up to be able to mix and match. I have it set up to be able to use as very immediate modular synth voices in a much smaller space than what I would have if they were kind of hardware boxes that I was taking with me. And this case was to get away from that, to be a bit more creative, to do more sound design, to be able to mix and match, you know, oscillators with modulation, with different filters, with different effects, and all of that, with the idea of using those sounds that come out of this in two different ways. One, using them in production and recording them into Ableton, having them be kind of the cornerstone of the type of productions that I'm working on, but also wanting to be able to record things from this that I can use in live performance. And a lot of that is because of the Digitakt 2 and because of how good the samples are now that it's stereo sampling, now that there's 16 tracks. So being able to take things from this modular case, record them, recording certain, you know, whether it's a loop or a lead or something like that, and having those available to be able to use, even if it's just a one-shot sound, to be able to have that within the Digitakt 2 to be able to use in performance, for me, I feel like is really powerful. And so that was kind of the reasoning behind this case. Plus I had a bunch of modules that I had swapped in and out of my performance case, and some that I had been wanting to get for a long time, but I had never gotten because they were too big for the kind of small setup that I had limited myself to for live performances. So being able to get things like this DPO oscillator here, which is huge. I mean, that would take up a quarter of my live case. Here, being able to use that, and it's just an oscillator. So now it needs other things to make it sound the way we want it to sound. So by the time you put it together, you've used up half the case between, you know, oscillator and envelope and filter and VCA and all that stuff. So being able to kind of spread out a little bit and get comfortable was one of the reasons for going for this. So just real quick, the way that this is set up here, for anybody who's curious about kind of what modules are where and why, I kind of did it by row as much as I could. Some things didn't fit quite exactly right, but thanks to Modular Grid, I was able to kind of move things around and see the way that they should fit. So I have it basically set up so that this top row is voices, whether they're individual oscillators or whole voices. The next row down, we have modulation and modulation sources that kind of starts to go down to the row below as well. Then we've got filters and VCA in this area. And then the next level down is effects and different types of effects. And then on the bottom, we have mixing and sequencing, and the Mordex data to be able to use for a whole bunch of different things, but wanting to have that screen a little closer to be able to see it really well and to make it a bit more useful. One thing that's a little unique about the way this is set up, and it's this patch that's here right now is kind of the basic patch, other than I have the DPO set up to just do a little bit of stuff right now and a kick, but all the rest of this that you see down here is really kind of patched this way semi-permanently. Because what I wanted to be able to do is I wanted to be able to duplicate in a modular setup something like what you would do in a DAW, where you would have sends for different things, and being able to use the effects as sends and not just individual effects. Because obviously you can use individual effects here and you can patch them straight in, and that's kind of an easy way to do it. But one thing that I have set up here is with this Dope Matrix mixer, it's basically set up so that I can have 4 voices going into one side, and then out the bottom I have patched into 4 different effects. So the Striving Starlab, the Endorphins Ghost, the Soma Lyra 8 effects, and the Qubit Prism. So those are all on individual channels of this matrix mixer. So like A, B, C, and D are those 4 things. Then the outputs from those are going into this little stereo mixer over here. And then that's going into one stereo channel in the main mixer, the WMD performance mixer, before that goes out to Ableton. So the idea being that that's all set up as different sends. So like if you were working at a DAW and you wanted to set up some send and return channels, you could set up, you know, on every channel, for example, on Ableton, you could have one reverb that goes to one particular control, and it's a send from every channel that you have. That's the way this is set up. So right now I have one voice kind of acting, which is the DPO voice, and then that's going into the first input. And now I have access to A, B, C, and D, which is those 4 effects that were down here. So when I hit play over here, I can have the basic sound from the DPO, which is this. But then I've also got the effects, which is this effects chain, although they're not really chains, they are mixed. But they're mixed here as far as how much is being sent in, and they're mixed here as far as how much is going into the final mixer. So that can come out the other end. And what's interesting having it this way is I can actually pull out the main sound and just have the effects. So if I just wanted to use, let's say, just the prism, without the original sound, or if I just wanted to use just the ghost, I can have just that sound on the send, or I can combine them. Which, again, one of the main reasons for creating this was to come up with new creative sound design things that I could use in production and also save for performance. So to be able to come up with things where the effects chain is separate from the actual inputs, and I can put multiple things into that. So if I wanted to send, you know, anything that I wanted to, so I could send, let's see here, just patch this kick into one of these channels as well. So then if I was to put in just a random pattern of the kick, so I don't have it going into a channel, so you're not hearing it on the main one, but if I played now the effects channel, and I can take out the original voice, and I'll just make this a basic 4 on the floor kick so you can hear what the effects are doing. So again, this gives me options. Again, that's just the effect, just from the kick, but then I can mix in some of the melodic part. And once again, that's just the effects channel. That's just the return of that effects group and not the original, which is this. Right. So it gives a lot of cool options, kind of creatively for things that, take that out. It gives a lot of options creatively for making sounds. And that's kind of what everything's designed for here. I had some existing voices, which, like I said, they're the ones I was used to using. There's a lot of kind of all-in-one voices. So what I wanted to add to that was some more unique and interesting sounding voices. So I have the Chaos Odessa, which is an additive synth, which I didn't have any additive synthesis here. And I got the DPO, which is great. It's a complex oscillator, and it allows you to do a whole bunch of different things internally before the sound goes out, and then being able to send that out through effects chains and through processing and things like that. That was the reasoning behind those. Then getting some other things like the Kozalin or Koshalin, how you say it exactly, frequency shifter. So being able to run things like additive synths or complex oscillators through frequency shifters with modulation. So it gives me a lot of options to create really cool, interesting sounds that I wouldn't have been able to do with the setup the way that I had it in my live performance case. So that was kind of the reasoning again behind this whole thing. So let's take a look in the chat. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or anything you'd like me to talk about or show or demonstrate, or anything, I don't know, any news you want to talk about. Any of that stuff is good too. So let's see. Quiet. Okay, we already got that. Nice new case. Thanks. That's the subject. That's the thing we've been chatting about here. Hey, unknown artists. Good to see you here. Thank you guys all for joining. I know it was kind of like a weird pop-up thing, but that's kind of how I've been doing things lately. It just makes it a little bit more interesting and fun. Anytime I have time that I'm going to be here, that's what I'm trying to do there. So, so we've talked a little bit about the case. Now we can go through how everything's really set up studio-wise, so that it makes it really functional and really usable. So you can't, well, let me see if you could see from this view. So just over here behind, you can't really see probably the box completely, but there is a Tascam audio interface back here, the 20 by 20. I think it's now an 18 by 20. This is an older one. I don't think they make this one anymore. But that is one of the audio interfaces that's going into Ableton. Then over on the other side of the room, there is my main mixer, which is the Tascam Model 24. And that is the other place that sound is going into. And then within the Mac, I created a composite audio device, which allows those to show up in Ableton as one audio interface. So then you select that as your audio interface, and you've got all of the channels from both of them that are going in there. So the one over on the other side of the room is kind of the main mixer. That's where this voice is going into. That's kind of what you're hearing on the stream is coming out of that main mixer. And that's also got any of the synths and drum machines that are on the other side of the room are going into that mixer. All of this stuff over here is going into the mixer that's on this side. So we've got main outputs that are coming out from the WMD performance mixer are going into one channel. So the modular is all one input into Ableton for the time being. I'm looking into getting the DB25 add-on for this mixer so that I can multi-track out of this. So anything that's going into this can be multi-tracked into an audio interface and then into Ableton. Then we have the Syntact, which is going into Ableton via Overbridge so that I can multi-track all of the tracks from that. The Digitakt 2 does not have Overbridge support yet. They're still working on it. So that's going in through an audio channel. So that's just one single audio going in. The Percons is going in through an audio channel, the SH101 is going in through an audio channel, and the analog rhythm over here is going in via overbridge, and that's being multi-tracked in. And then within Ableton, so I can kind of control everything from the push 3 over on this side. Within, let me switch to a different view here. So yeah, so within Ableton, within the push 3, I tried to narrow it down as much as I can to having 8 kind of inputs or input groups so that it keeps it on one screen, so I'm not constantly scrolling back and forth. So this has the kick, which is coming directly from the battering ram into the interface. It's not going through the performance mixer. Then the rhythm is set up as a group, so I can close it down and kind of control overall volume of the group, or I can open that up and it opens up to all of the tracks of the rhythm that are going in individual. Then the Percons SH101, the modular coming in by itself, the Digitakt, and then the Synth is also set up as a group. And then the final channel on here is called modular samples, and that's basically set up so that if I record something out of the modular on that track into a sample clip, I then move those over to the modular samples one so that I can play them and then go back and record other things within the modular, or coming from the modular going into Ableton. So switch views again here. Keep switching views around, try to keep it interesting. But yeah, so all of those things are, that's kind of how I have things going in multi-tracked into this audio interface, and then that's connecting virtually through the app that's within the Mac that allows the composite device to be able to be created. Then that's going into Ableton, and then I select that as one input, and that gives me access on all of the different channels to be able to take audio input from the from any of the audio interfaces that are here. And if I was to add another audio interface later on, you can always add that as part of the composite device, and then that just gives you more channels. So it's a pretty cool little thing. So let's see here in the chat. Hey everyone, Karn Black just ordered the Battering Ram. Wise choice. It is a crazy good sounding drum, as you just heard a minute ago, which we can talk a little bit more about if you'd like. Your effects mix bus won't work because of the post pre setup they have. Yes and no. So I'm going to be getting the new WMD performance mixer. I'm getting a beta test model coming up in the next couple weeks. And with that one, I will be able to do that. So that was one of the reasons for setting this up. This way I can just kind of record it in if I want to use that stuff, which I'm doing at the moment. But it will be able to work soon. In the new machine. The new WMD performance mixer is pretty crazy. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I know they have it for pre-order already on I think Perfect Circuit and Patchworks and maybe some of the others. But yeah, check it out. It's pretty amazing, and I can't wait to get my hands on them, although it is gigantic. So I don't know that it's going to make its way into my performance case just because of the size, but it will definitely be making its way into this case. Because it does have a few things. Not only can you record out multi-track, but it also has 8 stereo channels, where this one has 6 mono and 2 stereo. You've also got the ability to have multiple sends and returns. It has the ability to record over USB MIDI fader movements. So if you want to do a pre-fader mix, but then record your movements into Ableton, you can always go in and change things. If you've got anything that was weird or that you want to change on your mix, you can do that on the new one. So a bunch of other things too, but definitely check it out. It's very cool. I got to play with it at Superbooth, and William's been working super hard on it, and it's very, very cool. Definitely going to be an upgrade. So let's see here. Foot massage? What? I don't know what that's about, but okay, whatever. Let's see here. Percons versus analog rhythm. Oof. So that's like, it's, that's a very difficult question. If you're talking about which one's better, that's going to be a personal preference thing. For me personally, if I had to choose one over the other, I would choose the analog rhythm. But I think they're very different machines, although they have a ton of things that they do that are the same. And it's one of the reasons why I love both of them so much. I love the fact that with the Percons, you have parameter locking by step. You can record knob movements, so you can record in automation, which is really cool. I love that you can save kits and patterns separate from one another, and you can drop new kits on top of playing patterns. All of that stuff is the same as it is on the rhythm, which is amazing. You know, there are some limitations. You know, the Percons has four tracks. The analog rhythm has 12 tracks that are really 8, because you've got you have some that share voices. So you would have you've got, they act like a choke group. So yeah, so it's really 8 voices, but 12 tracks, where this one is 4 straight up. The analog rhythm, you've got effects per channel. This, you've got 1 send. You can do effect sends per channel, which you could also do on the rhythm. And then the biggest difference, I mean, the biggest reason why the rhythm is my, you know, in my opinion, the best drum machine ever, is because you've got analog drum synth engines, which can be very easily layered with samples on every track. And so creating sounds, having the flexibility to do a sample-based workflow, a synth-based workflow, or a hybrid of the two in any way that you choose to do that is pretty amazing. So if I had to choose one over the other, I would pick the rhythm. But as many of you have heard me say on these streams before, I think the rhythm would probably be the last piece of gear that I sold if I had to sell everything in this room, just because I love it so much. I think it's such a flexible piece of gear that kind of does it all. So yeah, Doming, totally agree. Rhythm all day. But yeah, the rhythm is more flexible, more powerful, all of that stuff. The Percons, at least for me personally, I don't really use it like a drum machine. I use it as a percussion machine. So it's really great for hats. It's got, you know, Car+ Strong synthesis, so you can make kind of cool bass sounds and tonal things. It's got cool snare engine and things like that. So it's good for kind of percussive drum things. But you know, as far as the rhythm goes, I think it's 10 times the machine for basically exactly the same price. Let's see, how do you deal with noise? So that's a funny question, because you know, I have certain pieces of gear in my setup that are crazy noisy, like the Ghost. Like if I turn this up, if you can hear, you won't be able to hear it with this. The Ghost itself just creates a ton of noise because it has so much going on in one thing. It's got, you know, distortion and overdrive and delay and reverb and all that stuff in one unit. And so it's just really noisy. For me, I like that. I like kind of imperfect, noisy sounds. It's something that I love to be able to do when I'm creating sounds and doing sound design, is creating things that have a lot of kind of like noise and kind of feedback and harmonics and wave folding and things like that. So I'm creating that anyway. So having noise really doesn't bother me that much. For a lot of people, they have to be a lot more careful about how they wire things and what's run where and all that kind of stuff, because they're looking for a much cleaner sound than I am. I'm not necessarily looking for that. So doesn't bother me at all. although there are certain, things that are noisy that I don't like, but for the most part, I deal with noise by not letting it bother me and just kind of saying it's part of the sound of my studio, and part of the sound of my setup. Just like, if you're a guitar player, and which I kind of grew up playing guitar in blues rock cover bands. And so if you listen to something like, if you listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan's cover of Little Wing from Jimi Hendrix, if you turn it up before the music starts, you can hear the hiss and the hum from his amp before he even starts to make a sound. And that's part of his sound, just like it is for a lot of other artists. And so for me, I really don't care if the sound is totally clean. If there's something where I absolutely need to have a clean sound, which I can't imagine why that would be, there's ways that you can clean things up, but it's not anything that's ever been an issue for me. So that's how I deal with it, is by not letting it get to me, not having it be a big deal. Let's see. Hey there, what's going on, man? What's up, Jason? Tend to agree. Be taking it to a gig. I've seen the Percons being. So the Percons, when you talk about playing with it live, there's a couple things that are challenging for me. I've only used it once or maybe twice in live gigs, and they were local. It's big. It's really big. I mean, I don't know if you can see this. Here, I will unhook the rhythm so you can see the size difference. It's gigantic compared to the Rhythm. So, and that's the Rhythm Mark II, which is already gigantic compared to the Rhythm Mark I. So the Percons is a really big machine. It's not very heavy. I think it actually weighs less than the Rhythm, but it's just really big size-wise. So taking it to a travel gig is definitely not an easy task. You need to kind of dedicate space to it. So it's a big machine, but it's not heavy. Like I said, it's lighter than I think it's even lighter than the Rhythm Mark I, but it's a big giant machine. And part of that size is what is so beautiful about this machine. Everything's spaced out. The knobs are large. There's no menus. Everything is there. So they need a lot of real estate for that. You need space so that you've got space between the knobs, and being able to put big knobs and large things on something, being able to have all 4 sequencer lanes all visible at the same time, rather than just putting one where you'd have to switch between them. You could do that like you have on the Rhythm, but then, and that could make it smaller, but then you lose a lot of what makes the Percons amazing, is the fact that you've got everything right there, immediate, and able to be used, right away. So yeah, goods and bads. There's no perfect machine, but it's amazing. That's why it's here. For those of you who've watched these, I've said this a lot, but the only stuff I keep, the only stuff that is still here in the studio, is things that I use and that I love and that I feel like either does something really unique and different, or it's just a pleasure and an inspiration to play. Those are the only things that I keep. I buy and sell a ton of gear. Like I'm not a gear hoarder, but I'm also not somebody who just gets rid of stuff. I will get stuff, I'll try it out, and if I don't like it, or if it's not the best at what it does, or if it duplicates something else that I have, I get rid of it. And which is why you've seen a lot of things kind of come and go out of my setups over the years. So yeah, the Percons is here for a reason. It's here specifically in this kind of writing corner for a reason, because I love it. So if we're doing, let's see here. So I use it a lot for hi-hats. I love the sound of the hi-hat engine here. And I love being able to have kind of immediate control, like really fine control over decay, for example. Just to be able to get a really clean, crisp sound, the Percons is amazing for that. So again, I use it a lot for percussion. and for things like hats, for things that are more percussive like that, just because it's an amazing machine specifically for things like that. Yeah, so that's the Percons and why it's here. Let's see, what else do we have here? Battering Ram through WMD carbon filter makes it even más fuerte. So worth it. Yeah, I actually do have a carbon filter right here and a battering ram right here. Normally I put the pizza through the carbon filter. I really like that combo. I like the kind of clean digital FM sound going through that kind of warm, rough carbon filter. And I also like to use the FM into the carbon filter. But yeah, the battering ram is, I'll definitely try that through there because I think that would be a great combination for sure. Although I like it really great on its own. I haven't needed to put it through any filters yet. I've been using it completely filterless for the moment. Let's see. Yeah, definitely try it. Good evening, Gamma Decay. The Percon size scares you. Yeah, it's big. Like I said, it's huge. It's not heavy, but it's huge. Production rack is a techno machine. That's the Odessa. It's not the Sophia. I thought about the Sophia, but I really wanted to go with the Odessa because I didn't have anything that was additive. I've got analog, I've got FM, I've got wavetable, I've got the BIA, which is the BIA, its own thing. I had the DPO for a complex oscillator. So I really wanted something that was additive because I didn't have anything like that. So yeah, that was why I got that. How much is the Percons? It's right around 2K. You can get them used for about 17 or 1800. So it's basically the exact same price as the Rhythm, maybe $100 more. But yeah, they're more or less the same price, and I think you get a ton more from the Rhythm than you get from the Percons. So I would say if you were choosing between one, I would get the Rhythm. But if over time you can save up, or if somebody wants to give you the other one, you would definitely love to have both of them. But if you had to choose one, I would say that the Rhythm is the way to go. Kozlin too, yeah, or Koshalin. I heard the other day it's Koshalin is the way it's supposed to be pronounced. But yeah, frequency shifter, which is again super cool. And again, the whole point of this is sound design and exploration. So having things like a filter matrix, and having things like the Belgrade filter, which is another one that's really great because you can really change things around. Having cool filters like the steady state gate is, being able to run some of these crazy weird oscillators through frequency shifters, through bizarre filters, is getting the sounds that I'm looking for, because I want to have sounds that are really unique and really unique to this rig, but also unique to my productions, and then also to the live performances that I'll use them in. So yeah, you're welcome. Let's see. Even thought about Knob CV recording it. Oh, with the Koshalin. Yeah, maybe. I haven't even tried it. I mean, again, that's one of the new modules. About a third, maybe half of what's here. Well, I would say maybe between a third and a half of what's in this case is relatively new to me. I just did a whole bunch of trading to get rid of a bunch of gear that I wasn't using, and swap in a bunch of gear that I had kind of a specific list of things that I was looking for. Like I said, to give me some real flexibility for really creative sound design. That was kind of the whole way to go this way. And every piece here does something cool and unique and different. So it kind of goes back to that thing that I was saying before about to kind of earn a spot in the setup and be something that doesn't just get resold. It needs to be something that that really brings something to the table. I don't just want to have a bunch of kind of generic modules just to have modules, but I want to be able to have things that are that serve a purpose. You know, that serve, and the purpose for this, again, like I said, is the sound design and production side of things. So, yeah. Well, again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to pop those into the chat. In the meantime, we can go through a little bit about how this sounds and what it's doing. We can actually, let's try what you were just talking about. So we've got the sound of the, actually, I'm just gonna patch this right in here. We've got the sound of the battering ram all by itself, which is here. Cool thing about this battering ram module is that you have a ton of control over it. I didn't realize until after I got it that it was a collaboration project between Shakmat Modular, the company that put it out, and Mark Nostromo, who works for Ableton. And he was actually the person who designed the drum bus for Ableton, which I think if you use Ableton, you use drum bus to make your drums sound amazing. So obviously this is somebody who's thought a lot about what goes into making drums sound really, really good. And that's kind of shown itself in the battering ram. So this, you get a lot of control. So again, if I turn this all the way down, so this is without any drive, without any decay, and without any transient click at all. So if we start to add a bit of drive, you feel it kind of come alive a little bit. Then we can add some decay to it. Really feel that kind of low end kind of take over. And then you've got the transient that you can add to the top. So if you need that kind of punchy click to get, you know, to really stand out in a mix, you can really drive that up. Now, interestingly, the drive itself, which is kind of a key to this, the drive, they were really smart about it, and they put in 2 different drives. So what a lot of companies would do is they would say, okay, we're gonna go from A to Z. This is the extent of the amount of drive that you can do from this module. And we're gonna have you know, one is going to be all the way to the left, and then you're going to drive all the way to the right, and that's going to be minimum and maximum. Well, they wanted you to be able to have finer control over the drum, which I think is really, really important, and I'm really thankful that they did that as well. So what they did was they created it so that the drive exists in 2 different things. You've got the green and you have the red. So the green drive, the top like 25% of the green part of this drive is the bottom 25% of the red drive. So you can decide how much drive you want. So for example, this is all the way through the green one. And that gets you up to the top. And then if you bring it down to the bottom and you switch over to the red, you see you're kind of starting where the green left off. And you can take that up as nasty and as ugly as you want it to be. I've been using it pretty exclusively on the green one just because it's more the style of drums that I like to do. But again, you've got a lot of control with this. So if you were to take that kick, or the click off of this, and you were to tune it down a bit, take a little drive off, and then boost up the decay, you can get some really great sounding, kind of lower end 808 sounding kicks. So you can see you've got a ton of variety with it. You have a ton of flexibility, which makes it a really crazy cool drum machine. kick drum, sorry. Then we can, let's put this through the carbon, like you said. Why not? Let's give it a try. The beauty of modular is we can go through things like this. And let's see what that sounds like. That's pretty cool by itself, down low. And that's with no resonance on the filter. That's as the resonance goes up. And then if you put it on the fold setting, that's pretty cool. I don't know how well you can hear that. I don't know if that's translating through the YouTube compression, but it's pretty cool to have that low end in there. But yeah, just coming back to what it sounds like by itself. And again, a lot of control. You have control over the depth of the attack as well. Settings that I've been enjoying, which is right about there. Cool. So anyway, that's the Battering Ram. Pretty cool machine. You felt it in your soul. Well, that's good. Yeah, it's funny because I haven't had any drums in my modular case at all. I've always been kind of a drum machine on the outside of the modular person because I like the control, I like the sound of a lot of drum machines, specifically drum machines like the Rhythm. You know, like I was performing live with the Rhythm for a while, and if I was using the Digitakt, it was with samples, like kick drum samples that I made on the Rhythm by layering like 909 samples with the analog drum synths in the Rhythm, and then resampling that and making really cool kick drum sounds, and then loading those into the Digitakt and using those for performance. It wasn't until I heard this module, I heard the Battering Ram, and I was just like, holy moly, this like sounds amazing. And I've got to hear it on some really big systems. I got to hear it on a Function One system when I played in Seattle recently. Got to hear it on the Function One system in Berghain when I was in Berlin, and just a stellar sounding module. Sounds great live, and being able to put that into production again is the reason why it's here, reason why it exists for all of this stuff. So yeah, let's see, what do we have here? Yes, Francois does a great job of talking about it, and he's a super nice guy as well. It was very cool getting to hang out with those guys when I was in Belgium, and they, hearing kind of their story, that Francois was an electrical engineer that had nothing to do with the music world other than the fact that he was into modular himself, and he started making modules on his own for himself, and people really loved the way they sounded and asked him to start making modules for them, and that was how the whole company came to be. It was kind of a demand based on how good things sound, rather than somebody like, hey, I've got an idea, let's see how I can market it. It was really different way to look at it. But yeah. Yeah, no menus in this. That's another thing. I mean, like, I've got menus in my hardware, I've got Ableton that I use, so I wanted to have something that was really hands-on, kind of like what I love about the Percons. You know, I love things that you can just say, I want to impact the sound. So I'm going to touch that thing, and that's going to impact the sound, rather than I'm going to go in and find the right thing in the menu to do that. So let's see here. You're going to need another filter. Yeah, maybe. Used to layer the BIA kick a lot. You know, it's funny. The BIA, I mean, it's a staple in my live performance rack. It was, you know, obviously going to end up in here as well. I virtually never use it for drum sounds, which I know people who exclusively use it for drum sounds. And I just found these like really cool kind of tonal percussive things and tonal things at the beginning when I started using it. And that was kind of where I've always gone with it. So I love the BIA for things other than drums. Although it was funny, when I first put this case together, the very first night that I fired it up, I didn't have any of the other equipment connected, and I started messing around with sounds, and I wanted to add some drums, and I was like, well, I've got the battering ram, so I can put a kick, and I was like, oh, I wish I had a hat, and then I was like, oh wait, I have the BIA, and just made a hat super quick because of how quickly and easily it makes a hat. So yeah, it's a crazy powerful module. It can span the gamut, which is, you know, in my live performance rig, that's the common theme of all the voices that are in there, is they have a ton of flexibility compared to the amount of space that they take up. So the BIA, the Pizza, the OXI Coral, they all are incredibly powerful and diverse for the amount of space that they take up. So yeah, the BIA is right in there, even though it's not even though it doesn't have a ton of different voices like the OXI does, it has a ton of different voices just by the nature of it being so flexible and so easy to kind of just twist the knob and you've got something totally new and different with it. So let's see here, what else do we get? I typically use mod bass into tritone jive. Yeah, it's, you know, that was one of the things when I was talking to the Shockback guys, they said that they had given one of these modules to Colin Benders, and the first time he used it, the first day he had it, the first time he used it was in the event that I saw him play at Berghain when I was there for Super Booth. And I didn't know he was using that kick, and we were commenting about how crazy powerful his kicks sounded on that system in that room. And then the next day I found out from the Shockback guys that it had been this, and he had come back and told them not only that he really loved it, but he said for the first time ever, like in his modular history, it was the first time that he didn't need to layer anything to make kick sounds, that it was all in one module. And when I spoke with him afterwards, he said this is never coming out of his case. He said he just loved it, which I think is an amazing thing. So yeah, it's a crazy module, and to have it take up only 8 HP, I think is also crazy. They crammed a ton in, and the knobs are large, so it's really easy to use, all in that one space. The other thing that's really cool that it has as well, I mean, it has a high pass filter, which is great. It has a gate as well, has the ability to lock the tune, which I think is really cool. You can save presets in it, which is nice. But then it also has an envelope out, which by pressing one button, you can invert the envelope. So you can send out an inverted envelope of your kick drum and basically push sidechain out to other things. If you push that out and you were to like molt that out to your VCAs, you could have that so that it would duck the sound just like what a compressor would do when it was sidechaining, and it would be tied to your actual kick rather than trying to sequence in ducking, which is what a lot of us do when we don't use a full sidechain compressor. And this is a way to get it even closer to a sidechain in your thing. So you use the BIA mostly for bass and leads. So do I. I use it a ton for bass. Like the Pizza and the BIA, I use those a lot for basses and leads. And I also like the BIA for like tonal percussion. So like really short envelope tonal stuff. And then being able to switch between octaves on it is really cool as well, because it can instantly become something else. Let's see here. Crust is a great alt firmware. Yeah, I played around with that at Superbooth. It was really cool. I liked it a lot, but I love the pizza, like the regular voice of the Bastel pizza. So if I was to use that firmware, I would get a separate one. I wouldn't swap them out because I just love this voice too much. As FM goes, it's so crazy immediate. Like here we can put. Patch this in really quick. Try to have this not be too awful boring for everybody. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna make this super easy on us. And I'm gonna patch in something that I already have. Let's see here. So, just gonna move this stuff around a little. There we go. Sorry, didn't mean to blow your ears out. So the pizza, super cool thing about this is that the tune knob, once you have it kind of fine tuned, you can just change by octave. So you can go from these really crazy, awesome FM bass sounds and you can set it up within the parameters. You can set it up so that the control knob on it controls the envelope. So you can do super short envelope, or you can, and then if you go to the left side, you add attack. So again, tons of flexibility in one tiny little space. And that was, you know, again, another reason why that's in my live setup and why it's here. It's kind of like the FM representative in the case. Although there's a few other things that do FM, it kind of really specifically does FM. And when I play live, in my live rig, the pizza is probably, I would say, 80% plus of the bass lines that I use from the pizza, because putting that through the carbon filter, which I can do right now. Let's see here. Again, the beauty of Modular. So you can have it sound totally different. So you can kind of take the edge off of that FM sound while still maintaining all of the cool FM bits, but without having it sounding super metallic. And then if you added the wave folding part, so yeah, again, tons of flexibility in one space, and that's why it's a big part of my performance rig as well. But yeah, for sure, it's a crazy powerful module, and if you're looking for an FM sound, it's definitely the way to go for that amount of space that it takes up. Let's see here, ARPed BIA for progressive techno, yeah, for sure. Got a show coming up this weekend. Oh, that's right. Is that are you playing the Mod Bang show? Is that this weekend? I saw Matthew posted something and I thought I saw your name on there. But that's cool. I'm glad you're inspired by the setup. That's what, I mean, the whole reason why I do this stuff is because it seems like whenever I do this, people are like, oh, that's so cool. I learned this. I got this cool idea. Like, I don't ever want to say like, yeah, you have to do it this way. This is the thing. You've got to buy this. You've got to do this, because that's not really what this channel is about. It's not what I'm about at all. It's really about, this is the way I'm doing it and how I'm using things. And if that gives you a cool idea to either do it the same or to use that and twist it in a different way, that's kind of how it is. That's what I want to see from this. You know, it's very much the way, like I get a ton of inspiration from people like Ricky Tinez and people like Ura and stuff, and they make very different music than I do, but I'll watch their stuff and I'll go, oh, that's a great idea. I could use that in my music in this way, you know, and it gives me these really cool, clever ideas of how to do things differently than I would have thought about on my own. So that's what I try to do here, is kind of show you guys what I'm doing, and that way you go, oh, that's cool. I can turn that in a different way for what I'm doing, or I've got a different module or piece of hardware that I could do something like that with, and it'll give you those kind of ideas. So that's the whole reason why I do that. So I'm glad it gives you some inspiration. That's awesome. Oh, Mod Bang's next week. Yeah, I saw that. I was pretty sure I saw your name on that when he put that up during his live stream the other day. But let's see here. Rhythm versus Syntact and Digitakt 2 combo. Well, let me show you what I think about that. I'll show you what I think about that. What I think is Rhythm, Syntact, Digitakt 2. And that's it for Elektron boxes. So you'll see, I don't know, the Elektron boxes are, each one of them is really unique. And this is kind of a cool segue into something that I wanted to talk about today. I even put it in the title of the stream, is the Elektron drum machines, because I have been getting so many questions about, specifically since the Digitakt 2 came out and I started using it. How am I using it? Is it a Syntact killer? Is it a rhythm killer? Is it an Octatrack killer? Is it a whatever? So I'll say something I've said a bunch of times before, but just to be as clear as possible. Elektron as a company, they are a sequencer company. They make an absolutely, in my opinion, the best integrated hardware sequencer of any company. That said, I use some external sequencers, but we're talking about integrated with hardware. I don't think there's anybody who does it better than them. And they do it where it is integrated with different workflows to kind of go along with whatever your favorite workflow is. So if your workflow is samples, then the Digitakt or the Octatrack is for you. The Digitakt is probably much easier to use, in some ways more powerful now that the Digitakt 2 has come out. But there's certain things that it can't do that the Octatrack does. So if you're looking for those, you'd want to go Octatrack if you're a sample-based workflow person. If you are a synth-based workflow person, you're going to want to go Syntact or Digitone or Analog 4. Those are the synth-based workflows attached to the Elektron sequencer. And then you've got some other options, but one of the reasons why I say that the Rhythm is kind of the last piece of gear I would ever sell is because it's the one piece of gear that combines both. So you have a synth and a sample workflow in the same machine, and not only in the same machine, but on the same tracks, which I think is really amazing to be able to layer synths and samples on the same tracks in a piece of hardware, rather than having to do that, in a DAW, sending MIDI to a hardware machine while you're sending it to a sampler, whether in the box or out of the box, so that you can combine those into another. So it gets really convoluted. The Rhythm does all that under the hood of one machine. So it's pretty amazing. Now, that said, these three at least that I have here, and actually all of them at one point or another, are all marketed sometimes as drum machines. You know, the rhythm and the D-tone less. But these at least, you know, they say right on them, you know, the Syntax says 12-track drum computer. You know, they market themselves, the analog rhythm says 8-voice analog drum computer and sampler. So like, these are all sold as drum machines. And because of that, there's inevitably going to be comparisons, right? They're all sold as drum machines. They're all within the same box, you know, or within similar boxes, and they all have the same sequencer from the same company. They all look like drum machines. So what's the comparison? Well, I guess going along with what I was just saying before, a lot of what I try to do is explain how I use things, and then you can decide on your own if that's how you would use it, or if you would use it different, or if that gives you any ideas or whatever. I have never used the Digitakt as a drum machine. Since I got it, it for me has been a 12-voice mono synth. So I use it as 12 mono synths in one box. So when I travel to play shows, I can take that one box instead of, you know, a Minotaur and an SH-01A and whatever, and like having 12 little boxes there to get different mono synth voices. I can get them all from one machine. So that's, for me, what the Digitakt is for. That's why I have it. That's why I love it, and why it has a space sitting right here within arm's reach. The rhythm, we've already talked about a bunch about, you know, what it does for its strengths and its weaknesses. We haven't actually talked about its weaknesses. It's really bad at sequencing external gear. It actually didn't sequence external gear when it originally came out, and they added that as an afterthought in an update. It was never designed to sequence external gear. It was always designed to be kind of like, did its own thing. And so if you want something to sequence a bunch of external gear, don't get the rhythm. That's not what it's good for. As a drum machine, it's the best drum machine out there. The Digitakt was the first one where you could flip between the engines. So you could take something that you had set up as an audio engine, you could write something, a pattern on that you liked. Maybe you took it to travel, or you were sitting on your couch sketching. And then if you wanted to come into your studio and flip that to a MIDI track and send that out to another synth that was maybe your modular or maybe something else, you could do that. And they've since added that into the Digitakt 2, but the Digitakt was the first one that did that. So a super, super powerful thing to be able to have 12 tracks that you can use as combination audio MIDI, however, whatever combination you want. So you could have like 12 MIDI tracks, or you could have 6 and 6, or you could, however you want to do it. So then the Digitakt 2 came out, and why it's such a game changer, and why there's been a lot of hype and love about it, and why I absolutely love it, is because they've kind of kept expanding on a lot of the best things that the other machines do. So it's, you know, that whole flipping between audio and MIDI tracks that the Digitakt could do. You know, Digitakt can do that on 12 tracks, which was crazy. You know, before, the original Digitakt had 6 audio and 6 MIDI, and they weren't able to be switched. Sorry, 8 audio and 8 MIDI. They weren't able to be switched. Then all of a sudden, the Digitakt comes out, and you've got 12 tracks, and you can do that. And then it's like, okay, well, the Digitakt 2 comes out, and it's like, okay, well, now you've got 16 tracks that you can switch between audio and MIDI. And so it just made it that much more powerful. Having double the length of patterns possible made it super powerful. Having things like the internal compressor that can be used, they can be assigned by track, and not just the old internal compressor that all had to be either all or nothing. It was either on everything or it wasn't on anything. This way you can decide which it goes to. Then it has things that are unique to it, like, for example, the control all functionality that the digiboxes can do, which is great for performance. With the Digitakt 2, you can decide which tracks that that impacts. So it becomes, in effect, like control sum instead of control all. And so all of a sudden, it becomes, again, just that much more flexible. they've really doubled down on the idea of using single cycle waveforms to treat the Digitakt like a synth as well. Where it used to be you could do it. I have a video that I did on this channel a couple of years ago, way back when, about how to do that, and it was a bit convoluted. With this, it ships with a whole folder of single cycle waveforms in the factory samples. And not only does it ship with those waveforms, which I think it probably did before, but now when you preview them, it used to be when you would preview the single cycle waveform, it would just be a click because it was just playing the one cycle. Now, when you preview them, they automatically loop. So as you preview it, you hear the sound of the synth engine that you're gonna play. And so it in effect becomes a synth with all of those different engines. So it just became way more powerful in one unit than it ever was before. So yeah, so that's how they're kind of similar and different. But you know, to say which one's the best, I wouldn't say, because I don't think any one of them is better at everything than the others. I think that each one has things that it's better at than the other ones. You know, the Digitakt with the effects block is really cool. Having analog and digital synths in one box is really cool. It's got a lot of stuff that the Rhythm has, as far as like like overdrive and things like that, which they actually added to the Digitakt as well. But it's got a ton going for it as far as a synth goes, whether it's a drum synth or a tonal synth. Then you've got the Rhythm, which has all those things, sample layering with synth engines. It sounds phenomenal. The master overdrive sounds great. Having individual outputs, so like individual quarter-inch audio outs is great. So if you want to individually send those out to a mixer, or if you want to just send your kick out to sidechain things, or if you want to do whatever, it's crazy powerful. And then the Digitakt has all the things that we were just talking about. So each one of them has their own thing. And I think that whichever is the best for your individual workflow or your needs will kind of determine which one is the best for you. There's not one that's the best. So when I get asked flat out, you know, is this better than this? Or is this an Octatrack killer? It's like, no, the only Octatrack killer is going to be a new Octatrack if they ever come out with one of those. This is a different thing. You know, it's its own individual thing. So yeah, it really comes down to your personal preferences and workflow. So let's see here. Oh, Vincent Laverny. Hello. I haven't talked to you in forever. We should catch up, by the way. Good to see you on here, totally out of context. Vincent and I used to work together years ago in Europe. So yeah, I haven't seen him in a very long time. Good to see you. Send me a message. Let's see. Other competitors like Squire plan to have to partner with hardware. Yeah. The thing is that there is no other company that has an integrated sound engine and sequencer product where the sequencer is even in the same universe as the Elektron sequencer. Now, that said, there are sequencers like the OXI One, there are sequencers like the Hapax and some others, which are incredibly powerful sequencers and that do things that the Elektron sequencers don't do, you know, which is the reason why the OXI One is sitting right here in front of everything because it's sequencing this. I could sequence this from these boxes, but this does it better because I can randomly generate pitch in key, and I can quantize things to key much more easily in this machine than I can in the Elektron machines. So that's why it's here. But as far as an individual, you know, sound source with sequencer, there's nothing that comes close to what the Elektrons can do. When it comes to sample mangling, Which companies are killing it as far as sample mangling goes? Pop that in there. I'm curious, because again, as far as sample mangling, I am not a sample workflow specialist. It is not my preferred workflow. I prefer synth workflow, as you can see by what's here in front of me. But as far as sample mangling goes, I love the Octatrack, which is over on that side of the room. It does things that I have not seen in any other machine, but you know, if there's other things out there that are killing it as far as sample mangling goes, put those out there, because I know there are people that are not like me that love the sample-based workflow and that want to do stuff with that. So, one thing, let's see here, I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna patch these a little bit differently here so that we can send the pizza through the effects. With this setup, again, the way I have this set up with the kind of send chain with the effects, being able to mix them, I think is really key for me as well, rather than just having it go through different effects individually by individual module. And again, being able to take out the main sound. So that's it without the main sound. And then being able to kind of filter that as well. Adding in some of the wave folding. So it's adding back in the main voice. So again, seeing how quick it is to patch up just something like that, because this effects chain and this kind of this matrix mixer are tied in together already, being able to send that stuff through that was kind of a really important thing for me in this whole design, was to say, I want to have a bunch of effects that I can use independently, individually, or in combination, and have them be sends going through this way. So, and being able to put other voices into that matrix and mix those in as well is really key. So I can layer voices together, layer different rhythms, or send the same sequence to different voices and have them go through there so that they're going through the same chain. And just having a ton of flexibility was the whole point for this. Let's see. You want to hear the pitch shifter? Yes, I can put that through there. Let's see. Tasty chips for mangling, but Hapax Yeah, I mean they're good. I think that being able to do like random locks and things like that with the Octatrack, I think is still crazy powerful. But again, I'm not a sample mango guy, but it's if that's your workflow, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. Explain a bit more in detail. Have your effects chain connected to the mixer with the other voices? Yes, I will do that in just a sec. You want it? Well, let's do that first because we've got it set here. So again, we've got the dope for matrix mixer here. The inputs on the left side are all voice inputs. So right now I just have one voice going into it, which is the Bastel Pizza. That voice is going through the carbon filter, and then that is going into a mult. One side of that is going into a clean track. Oops, sorry, going into a clean track. Here we go. That's the clean sound. That's just the clean sound of the pizza going through the filter. Then the other part of that multiple is going into this matrix mixer. A, B, C, and D are 4 different effects modules down here. The Strymon Starlab, the Endorphins Ghost, the Soma Lyra 8 effects, and the Qubit Prism. And so we've got some combinations of reverb, overdrive, delays, matrix delays, things like that. Being able to kind of pick and choose which of those we use. So those are all able to be dialed in using this matrix mixer. So I can basically take them all down to nothing. Oh, and then sorry, before that, they all go into this little Bifaco stereo mixer. It's a 4-channel stereo mixer on this side. And then the stereo mix goes into a stereo channel on the performance mixer. So that becomes my return, which is independent of each of the clean channels because they're going through a mult before they go into that. So that way I can do parallel processing with the effects chain. So this way, for example, this sound, let me shorten this up. Clean it up a little bit. Clean it up just a little bit. So that's my clean channel. I can turn up the return. If I want to just send it through the Strymon Starlab, and then I have control over that. If I want to send it just through the Ghost, or if I wanted to send it just through the Soma, or if I want to send it just through the Prism. So that's all the different individual options that I have. Then being able to do it in parallel means that I can just have as an output just the effect side without the clean. And then I can add in other effects. Again, that's all just the effects return without any of the clean sound. So all of that is coming from this. And then you can mix the two together. the OXI, we can change up the sequence if we want. Something totally different. Clear it and write something in if you want. So anyway, that's how the effects chain's working. To be able to go in, and that's just one voice. I've got the ability to send in 4 voices. So if I wanted to line things up so that I had multiple voices that were getting the same sequence, I can do that. Or if I want to have different sequences going in, having things going in rhythmically, I can do that as well. And I can also have, if I had 4 voices, I can have them going, because it's a matrix mixer, I can have them going to different combinations of effects as well. So if I wanted one to only go to one effect, or I wanted something else to go to 2 or 3 or 4 others, that's fine. So they can all kind of go in together. So anyway, that's how that works. And you guys wanted to hear the Koshan. So let's see here. Just need to patch this in really quick. And then we're going to send this out to, there we go. So now, so that's that same sequence we were just listening to. No effects, just going through the frequency shifter. You want a kick? That's malted, so I can then be sent through the effects chain, which I'm going to take all those down for a sec. let you know this is all coming from this. That's kind of the unshifted version. But then as soon as you shift it down, So anyway, sorry, got lost there for a sec. But yeah, so that's the Koshalen or Koslin or whatever you want to call it, frequency shifter with the pizza going through it, through the carbon filter, through the effects chain that's all connected to this matrix mixer, and then with a couple of other things like the Battering Ram kick, and then some percussion hi-hats and things like that that are coming from the Digitakt too. So anyway, set up to jam. That was kind of the whole reason why this is set up this way. So yeah, let's see here. Where do we have, what did I miss? Okay, yeah, the prism is really cool. I love the kind of delay matrix part of it. That's kind of what I've been using it for a lot. So in what you were just hearing, this is just prism. So yeah, it's very cool. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have it in here, as I mentioned all along, is the whole idea of this setup was to be an exploration, sound design, kind of creative setup. And the Prism is one of those modules that for me was really cool for that because it adds a ton more things in there. So let's see. So do you have the output of each of your effects set to 100% wet? Yes and no. So it kind of depends. So I don't, actually I should say, the answer is no, I don't have them set to 100% wet. I have them going through a mixer, so I've got different levels on the output. Then in each one of the modules, they each have an amount, kind of a wet dry amount. So like the Ghost, as an example, has a delay wet drive, a reverb wet dry, a distortion wet dry. So I can have all of those things, and so I can really shape the individual sound coming out of each of the effects units. Same thing with the Soma. So there's like there's feedback, there's a drive amount, there's a mix amount, a mix distortion mix in, a delay mix in. So you can kind of decide how much of each of those things that you want coming through. And the same with the Starlab, same with the Prism. So yeah, each one of them has their own amount, so I don't have them set on all wet or any of that stuff. And again, with the matrix mixer, it's deciding how much is going into them. From within the unit, it's deciding how much that signal is processed wet dry wise, and then it's going through a kind of a level mixer on the way out to decide how much of that is going into that kind of effects track, that affects return track. So yeah, a lot of different levels all along the way, rather than just sending always into one thing. So, oh cool. Glad you're liking the sounds. May have missed it, but how do you sidechain? If you discussed earlier, look at the video, no need to refresh. So actually right now there's nothing sidechaining in here. Let me just double check and make sure I don't have something, because this is all going through Ableton sound-wise. So there was something set up to sidechain, and that was when I was sending the kick out to its own track. It was driving a sidechain of what was coming out of the modular, so but I wasn't doing that just now while I was playing, but I can show you what that would sound like just using the that's with the sidechain coming from that kick, but without the kick itself. And there's with the kick, and that's just to demonstrate on that effects channel. So yeah, so I wasn't actually in there. And again, production wise, I would do that in here. I would, you know, from a production standpoint, I would use the sidechain in the software just to keep it simple. For using the kick in my live performance, that's where that inverted envelope coming out of it comes in handy, and being able to split that out to send an inverted envelope to things, to be able to, in effect, sidechain from the kick module itself, which I love. I love the fact that, you know, unlike the Kickane, for example, that one you have to run your sounds through it in order for the sidechain to work. I love that you can push it out with this, and you can just, with the touch of one button, you can invert that envelope, so you don't have to send it through an inverter or an attenuverter in order to be able to get that out. So it's, again, a really super well thought out module. You need more knobs. Yes, definitely. Yes, the kick module does have a reverse envelope. I'm not using it, but yes, it does have a reverse envelope. So yeah. So what else? Any other questions? Pop more stuff into the chat if you would like to. Happy to respond to whatever. Questions about any of this stuff, any of the gear, any of the setup, how I've got things routed, or any of that stuff. it's kind of a new setup, and that's why I wanted to go over it here, because it's not exactly how I've been doing things in the past. In the past, I had things set up to pretty easily record hardware, but not so much modular. And I had the modular was over on my table where I would have my live rig set up, and I would have to run an output from there into one channel in the mixer and then set it up each time. This way I've got everything really set up, and I am just kind of finalizing a template on finalizing building a template in Ableton for all of this stuff, so that I got to figure out how to share my screen on this live streams, but I'll figure that out for next time. So I'm looking at it, but you aren't right now. But basically, a template that has, again, I try to keep it to as few tracks as possible in order to not have a whole bunch of different channels and having to, page through on the push when I'm using that. But so I have one track for the kick. I've got the rhythm as a group, but it's divided out into all 8 tracks. The Percons I have as its own input, the SH-101 as its own input. The modular right now has one input until I get a DB25, and then that's going to be a group, and those will be able to be multi-tracked based on the performance mixer, but not yet, but they will be able to. And then the Digitakt 2 is going into its own channel via audio because there's not overbridge support yet. Hopefully that comes very soon. And then the Synth is going in via overbridge, and it's multi-tracked as well. So all 12 of those tracks are going in independently. So if I was to come up with something on one track there or on 3 different tracks, that will all record in multi-track. And then the other 2 tracks that I have set up on there is one for modular samples. So if I record in a loop, like a clip that I want to save, I just move that across so that I can continue to keep recording on that modular channel. And I kind of save them on in that clip channel so that I can use them later. And then I have one MIDI track set up in here. So if I wanted to use a voice from within within Ableton, I can't. Using a VST. I can use that as well. Let's see here. Performance case work with your studio case. Not right now. I basically took my performance case apart and built, so I've got some voices, so like the Pizza, the BIA, the Battering Ram, are all normally in my performance case. Let's see what else. The Ghost is normally in my performance case. And then everything else is kind of living here. And the performance case, I can show you what the sad state that it's in right now. This is the sad state of the performance case because I took a bunch of things out in order to put them into the studio case. And I did that right now because I don't have immediate shows coming up. I think the next one that I have is going to be end of July, mid-end July. So this was kind of the perfect time for me to set everything up in here and then decide what I want to take with me in the performance case. If there's things that I want to record as samples into the Digitakt 2 and then use that instead of having certain modules or whatever. This is giving me a chance to kind of make those decisions without having to rush and feel like I have to do something because I've got it in the case in a certain way. Let's see here. Couple drone presets, yes. Let's see. Try to rewatch this so I can remember the modular names. I'll probably find myself involved sooner or later. Yeah, it's you get sucked in pretty quick if you're like me. I mean, I'm only a couple years into messing with modular, and it's become such an important thing just because I love the flexibility of it. I love the fact that I can just kind of set something up and have it work right away, which is amazing, you know, rather than having to be like, okay, what synth do I want? Okay, well that one doesn't quite sound like this. Do I need to put it through some pedals? Okay, now I need to sort this out, and you need patch bay, and you need all that stuff. This way I can just repatch everything right here, and it gives me a ton of flexibility. Let's see. Some questions. Do I sell sample packs? Also do provide mentoring services? Yes and yes. If you go to circolive.com, there, if you go to circolive.com/shop, I have one sample pack in there, which was my first one that I did, which was from the Percons. And it's basically a Percon specific sample pack because I felt like this was a drum machine that people wanted but weren't going out to get because it's really specific and it was kind of expensive. So I basically set that sample pack up in a really different way. Instead of having it being split up just between like kits, hats, percussion, whatever, I have it also split up by voice. So, because each one of the voices, the first two are kind of similar, but the other two are different. And so I have the sample pack set up so that it's by voice because they have some really kind of unique things that they do. Here, I'll show you from here. So this is the fourth voice that's really great for hats, but you can just switch modes. This one, let's see here. I'm wrong track here. So you can get a lot out of just one voice. Same thing if we go to voice 1, which is kind of the kick voice, right? So that's set up right now as a kick, but let's put some other stuff in here. And then again, the cool thing with this, kind of like with the Elektron machines, you can parameter lock by step. So that if you hold something down and change the tuning. So yeah, you can see that's the kick voice. So yes, I set up that sample pack by voice because each voice is really kind of unique and special. So if you go check that out on there. And then you asked about mentoring stuff. Yes, if you go to Patreon, that's kind of the easiest way to do it. There's a couple different levels. You can do a free version. You can do the $1 almost free version, which gets you into the Discord. Then there's a version that's $40 a month, and that includes a weekly kind of group coaching meetup call where we all get together on Saturdays, and it's a group Zoom call. We have different topics each time. We talk through stuff. We go through examples. It's kind of like this, except it's a lot more interactive and small group. And then there's a version that is $100 a month, and that includes all of those group coaching calls, the 4 per month, but then it also includes a 1 hour one-on-one per month as well. And then I do individual one-on-one lessons as well, and you can get packages of those or whatever. But you can check all that out on Patreon. Or shoot me a message. Just shoot me a private message either on here or on Instagram or somewhere. Happy to check out that stuff. So let's see what's next. Not a modular Eurorack guy, but find the Bastel pizza really interesting. If there's anything standalone, non-modular synth that's comparable. I mean, it's an FM synth. So if you wanted to go the Elektron route, you would go down the Digitone route. There's a Volca FM that actually sounds really great for not too much money. There is the Roland Op6 is another really affordable way to get into FM synthesis. So if you're looking for an FM synth and you want something that's more that sound, I would recommend one of those. I think the Volca FM is probably the cheapest way to get in. Correct me if I'm wrong. And if you know of a cheaper way, definitely post that in here. I don't think 1010 didn't do one of their little nano boxes that's an FM, did they? I know they have a granular, they have a sampler, I can't remember if there's an FM one or not. Go ahead and pop that in, but yeah. But anyway, those are great. Try VCV Rack. That's a great shout as well. If you're not into modular, but you'd like to get into modular, there's two great websites. One is VCV Rack and the other one is Modular Grid. VCV Rack is a great place to go in and test out. There's a bunch of companies that actually have their actual modules on VCV Rack in kind of a virtual format, and you can load that up as a plugin in your DAW of choice. So like if you're in Ableton, you can load up VCV Rack as a plugin and you can have a whole modular rack like this in your DAW virtually. Now, why wouldn't everybody just do that? Well, the reason is, and the whole reason why I'm doing this and not VCV Rack is I like the knob part of it. I like reach out, turn this, change this, repatch this, and I don't want to do it with the mouse. But it can be really cost prohibitive. It takes a long time to build up modules over time. There's a lot to learn and all of that stuff. If you're just getting into it, definitely go to VCV Rack, try it out. You won't have the most fun part about it, which is the workflow, but you will have the ability to check and see if it's something that you enjoy. And if you like modular, or it might just be too complicated and you're just not into the complicated side of it. So in that case, you'll learn that there and you'll save yourself a lot of headaches and a lot of money doing that. One good thing about modular though, from a money standpoint, is that it's progressive. You can kind of build up over time, and the modules really hold their value. You don't lose a ton when you resell them. There's a great resell market because there's a lot of people that are kind of getting in and out and swapping and trading. So again, like I was able to get a ton of these by trading modules that I had gathered over time. So it wasn't a matter of just going out and just dumping a boatload of money into this. And that's one of the really cool things with modular is that it really does hold its value. So I would say for sure. Yeah, hardware wise, if you already have VCV Rack, hardware wise, definitely the ones that I mentioned before. Hey, from Ireland. Cool. That reminds me, just while we're on here, there's quite a few of you on here today. While you're on, just post in where you're watching from. I'm always curious, and I think it's still bizarre to me. Like when I went to Europe, a few weeks ago, and I went for Super Booth and had some shows, the amount of people who came up to me and said they watched these streams or these videos really kind of blew me away. I always love the fact that I'm kind of in my basement studio in my house in Colorado, and I can broadcast this out and people are watching it from all over the place. So very cool to see that you were from Ireland. Okay. Do you use overbridge with your Elektron gear to have it more professionally mixed, mastered sounding? Like, would you do anything similar with your modular gear live too? Modular kind of mix master. If I'm playing in a place that has a really good sound system, I like to have everything go out as a final step through the Elektron analog heat because I do like to add some saturation and drive. I also put a high pass filter and bring that down to about 20-25 hertz and then add resonance. So it gives you a really good resonant boost on the low end. Although with the Battering Ram, I don't know if I'll need to do that anymore because that has a really super fat low end. But yeah, so that's what I do live instead of going through software. So let's see, what else? Korg Wave State, another good shout. Let's see, Modular is a money suck, but fun. The 4MS Meta module, yes, very cool module, the 4MS Meta. I got to see that at Superbooth. It's basically a module that fits into a modular case that runs VCV rack patches. So you can design something on VCV rack, load it into the Meta, and then take it with you and have kind of some knob functions on some things. So it's great if you're not sure if you want to buy a module, you can try it out VCV rack wise in a hardware format. Or if you have something that's really complex that takes a lot of modules and you don't have space for it, you can put that more complex patch into the 4MS Meta module and plug it into your system and have it go that way. So yeah, that's a great call. Let's see. Module of the year. Yeah, it could be. I mean, it was cool, but, and maybe this is just me, but the way I felt was that it was a kind of like a gateway drug module. It was something for people to try out modules before they got them, for people to try out VCV rack patches. I don't think you're gonna see, like the big modular guys with the 4MS Meta module with a bunch of VCV rack modules in it. I don't see that happening because you're still limited with the amount of knob per function that you have. So you lose a lot of the fun and the what's really interesting about modular with that module. It gives you some, but it's kind of like having a hardware box where you've got like a few knobs and then you have to change pages, or you can set things up like as macros. And so I think you lose a lot of what's great about modular. So I don't know that it's going to take off like that, but I think it's going to be an amazing module for people that are getting into modular and want to try some things out. Let's see here. Using Overbridge to properly mix master Elektron tracks has been a game changer for my live set sound quality. So you're using Overbridge in your live set? Does that mean that you're using a computer on stage running Overbridge that's mastering your tracks as you're playing them live? Or does that mean that you are mastering stems or parts that you're then loading back into your hardware to perform live? Or how are you using it? I'm kind of curious. But yes, I'm like in this setup, I have the Synth and the rhythm are both going into Ableton via Overbridge. The Digitakt 2 doesn't have Overbridge support yet, so it's not yet, but as soon as it does, it will. So that I can multi-track, which is really important for me in this setup from a performance standpoint. But I don't use Overbridge at all when I play live because I don't use a computer at all when I play live. I only use a few Elektron boxes and my small modular case. So let's see if there's a modular equivalent. So modular equivalent for kind of mix master, it's hard. So yes, there are, kind of end of chain, there are compressors, there are things like that. So a lot of people will go out through an analog heat, which is what I use. A lot of people use the Auto Boom, which is another really great one. The Endorphins Golden Master is also really good. There's a bunch of units, but the trick is, and again, this comes down to how you're playing live, what your workflow is live. But the trick is that you can't really just kind of do a set it and forget it mastering on your output if you are truly playing live, meaning that you're constantly changing things, you're doing different parameters, you're adding in a new voice, you're changing this, because all those are changing what the settings should be on any kind of, end of chain compressor or any of that stuff. So it's really difficult to do that other than something like super light, like limiting, catching, spikes in, things like that. It really needs to be gain staged all the way through, and it can't just be kind of fixed at the end. It's just not possible when you're changing so much. Like if you go from a really subby bass sound to a really high kind of heavy noise wave folded trebly sound, Well, that totally changes the way your output kind of mastering should be. So you can't really count on that. There's not any way to do that other than having somebody who's kind of like sound engineering your stuff and mastering it as you go, which is, I think, pretty much impossible. So yeah, so difficult. Toronto, Canada, good to hear. Let's see. Yeah, having patches ready to go to add to modular is cool. That's a cool thing about the meta. But again, for me, if I'm gonna design something sound-wise and I don't mind being on the computer, I would just use the computer, because the computer can do way more than the modular can do, especially with something like VCV Rack or whatever. So if I was gonna use that anyway, I wouldn't necessarily wanna then fold that back into the modular world. You could, but again, the meta module, I don't think there's enough inputs and outputs. I don't think there's enough knobs in order to make it really truly feel like modular. It's gonna feel like if you had a 1010 bit box in here playing samples, is kind of what it would feel like, because you have a few knobs that you can mess with things. You have parameters that were set up as modular parameters, but by the time they end up in that box, they feel very much like a sample, and they don't feel as much like a thing that was patched, because you could just patch it and sample it and put it into a sampler. So it's, I don't know, I'm apprehensive, but I hope for them, because I think it was a really clever idea. I think it was a really cool, option for a lot of people. So we shall see. Colorado Springs, Colorado, you are right down the road. That is cool. Paris, France, nice. Bonjour, bienvenue. St. Louis, Missouri, awesome. Miami, Florida, that's right, Domingue, I knew you were from Florida. Yes, laptop closed, hidden away, just have the tracks via USB. Only EQ sidechain master limiting. It was painful to start using a laptop, but had to do it because of how it improves my sound. Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I tried it. You can watch back, I don't know, a few months ago, I did a few videos where I was using an ES9 from Expert Sleepers to go out into my computer with Ableton. I was using Ableton as the mixer with a Launch Control XL doing faders. That way I could have a mastering chain on the end and do all that stuff. And what I found was it really didn't, it would only help, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Mastering, like truly mastering your sound only helps if you're only putting out one sound, if that makes sense. So like you would master a track because that track will have kind of a limited range of sound palette and kind of highs and lows, you know, volume wise and frequency wise. So you can master that, and it's still going to be kind of an average of those things. That's kind of, you know, when I'm mastering final tracks, it ends up being kind of an average of the track. You can't individually master by section. I mean, I guess you could, but it's much more complex than that. And so that works on a really limited basis, about, you know, for like a track. But if I'm playing a live show, like sometimes I'll play live sets that are 2 hours or 3 hours long, and they're improvised 100%. Like I'm starting my sets with blank sequencers other than kind of basic drums. And I have sounds often that I've kind of prepared, whether it's, you know, I can't in the modular because I'm not saving presets in the modular. So those sounds are all completely improvised in the moment. I have some sounds, like palettes of sounds, that I would save onto the Elektron boxes that I can use together, but I'm not saving sequences. I'm actually sequencing on the fly, adding effects, adding, you know, filtering and things like that, all on the fly. So all of that stuff would so dramatically, over the course of a 2 hour, 3 hour live set, so dramatically change the way I would want to do an end of chain mastering, that there's nothing that I could put on the end of chain that would work with it. I mean, I could do basics, which is what I do with the analog heat. So saturation, drive, the high pass filter to cut out the very, very low end and to add resonance in the low end for kind of sub and sub kick. And then I add in a tiny bit of highs with the EQ to kind of balance out the fact that I added some lows. And that's it. And I think any more than that, there's nothing I could really do that would, in general, help things. With the analog heat plus effects, one or two cool things that has. One is the bass mono. So when I use that as my end of chain, I'll mono everything below about 200 hertz. So that way it keeps kind of the low end super kind of centered and in your face. And then it also has a compressor, but I mean, we're talking like the slightest bit of movement in the compressor just to kind of tighten things a tiny bit. But other than that, everything is really from gain staging, quality of sound selection, quality of sound design that gets you to that final ending sound. Because there's not, in my opinion, there's not any kind of magic end of chain, even in a laptop. I mean, I would say especially in a laptop, because you're really static and you've kind of got everything that you can do. And that's really it. Unless, and I will asterisk this is only talking about my workflow. If your workflow is, you have pre-prepared tracks, which you are then, and they're prepared into stems, and you've got them kind of set up so you know exactly how they're going to act, and you're just in effect reassembling a pre-prepared track and doing some effects and things like that as a live set, then it would work better to do it with a laptop than it would with an improvised live set, because you can basically then say, I know exactly what I'm going to play. I know what these sounds are exactly going to sound like, and you can in effect master your whole live set to that average like you would if it was just one long track. Much more difficult, if not impossible to do when you're playing live. So you have to be able to kind of mix by ear, because you can't master afterwards to kind of fix things at the end. So yeah, that was kind of a long explanation for a short thing. Yes, live sets can sound jarring next to DJs, but I have to say probably 80% of the shows that I play, I'm either the only or one of a few live acts, and playing as part of a whole evening with a bunch of DJs who are playing mastered tracks. So yes and no. You just have to make sure that you get your levels right coming out, and that you've got things, your sound selection has kind of put things into the right place sonically, so that you don't necessarily need to master up at the end. And then you can get away with something simple like an analog heat plus effects, where you've got, again, saturation, high pass filter, a little bit of EQ, some drive, and that bass mono, and a touch of compression. And that's kind of it. And I hesitate to say compression. There's times when I don't put it on at all, because I think it can really mess up your sound a lot playing live. Your compression at one set of settings for one track is going to be very, very, very different from your compression with another set of settings on another track. And so where one may sound amazing, the other may sound absolutely horrific, and you may just crush it to death, or you may just kind of, have it, under or over compressed. So it's really hard with a full live set to get everything completely dialed in. Push 3, you can add OTT. Yeah, OTT. That's the magic sauce. Using the term mastering lightly. Yeah, no, and I do get what you mean. And I mean, I understand it's because, again, when you're playing with DJs, they are playing tracks that are mastered. I mean, they're, every single track they're going to play for the most part, unless they're playing something new that they just, loaded up, and that'll even have a rough master on it. Those are all going to be mastered in one sense of the word. So yeah, I get where you want to go that direction. Now, I would say you're kind of tilting at windmills trying to find that, because my personal opinion is that you'll never find it. Especially if you're playing improvised, because there's just no way to live master as things change. If you're playing something that is completely pre-prepared, it's possible, just like it's possible for DJs to have a certain amount of processing. But yeah, doing it live is much more of a challenge. Mixing mainly, configure my sounds from gear to specifically suit the basic mixing for each Elektron channel. Yeah. And so again, like I said, if you've got a lot that's pre-prepared, then it's easier. But you're still, if you're doing anything live at all, you're still changing things. I mean, filtering out highs, just low pass filtering things would dramatically change the way your compressor settings should be, for example. Or if you add in a reverb, you're adding in so much gain that comes along with the reverb that would dramatically change any mastering settings. So if you're doing anything with effects or filters or anything, it's going to be impossible to get what you're looking for. You can make it better as long as, like, the less you're doing in your live set, the better you can make it sound. And as bad as that sounds, so like you know, if you've got on one end of the spectrum DJing, where you can have total control over every single track you play because everything is mastered, you can have everything at an exactly precise level. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum would be playing completely live, improvised everything, where you have little to no control over any kind of end of chain mastering, but you have control over everything in your rig, which forces you to actually control everything in your rig. So there's a lot going on. The more you're improvising, the more you have to be doing actively throughout everything, and the less you can kind of set it and forget it with the mastering chain. And in the middle, you're gonna have all different versions of that and differing levels of success, I think, in the end. But I chased that ghost for a while, and it's just, for me, I would much rather spend my time writing songs than spending time trying to micro an end of chain master that's never going to do what I want it to do at the end of the day. And that's why I did try to go down the computer mixer road, and I only did it for a couple weeks, and I said, you know what, I don't like where that's going. It wasn't, in the end of the day, I wasn't gaining anything at all for my performance style, other than having less gear to bring with me. But in that case, I could just bring a laptop playing Ableton with a MIDI controller, and I could play live from there, and then everything could be mastered, everything could be perfect, everything could be whatever. But that's not why I got into live performance. I've been a DJ for over 30 years, and I got into live performance because I got sick of doing that. I got sick of just kind of pressing a button and having it do its thing and sound perfect. I like actively making music live on the fly in front of a crowd of people. So for me, live performance is improvised live production in front of a crowd, rather than I wanted it to be as far away from DJing as it could be, because I had done that for so long and I just had enough of it, and I wanted something totally different. So let's see here. Hardware issues with Elektron when using keep changing genre. Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult. Again, the more you pre-prepare, the closer you can get. So like, for example, even using something like the analog heat, you could have different, totally different mastering, end of chain mastering settings by track that could change via MIDI, via program change. So if you have tracks 100% prepared, and I go from track number 1 to track number 2 to track number 3, each one of those could have different settings. And when you change from one track to the next, you can send a program change to the heat in order to change that to your next preset of compression settings. But again, for me, that's too much like changing from one whole track to another whole track within Ableton Live by pressing a button and having it just automatically change to a new preset track. So you can, but again, it goes back to the less improvised it is, the closer you can get to that kind of tight sound that you're looking for, all the way to the point where it's like, okay, it's totally prepared, I'm DJing. That's the other extreme. So find your place in the middle where you want to be, and have fun with that. That's the key. Let's see, small to medium size Euro case recommendations for a modular newbie. Okay, so you may see this on the channel. Reach out to these guys and let them know, because I'm trying to get this. There's a company called Nano Modules from Spain, and they have a case that is called the Caixa, C-A-I-X-A, and it is a it's a 3U104 case, but then it has a 1U row, but it doesn't have modules that are interchangeable. They all come built in, and it's basically all the utilities that you would need. So like multiples and little mixer, and there's what else is there? Quantizer, I think. There's a VCA. So like the not fun utility modules are built into the case. So you just get to buy the fun stuff. You can buy the voices, the effects, the filters, things like that. And it's all in one case with a handle, and it's really inexpensive. It's like, I think it's inexpensive in the modular world. It's like $500, and it includes like $500 worth of what would be modules that you would have to buy. So in effect, you're getting a case for free. And cases are going to cost you, even the most basic palette case is going to cost you, $300. You're going to spend $300-400 just on the case. So this one you spend $500 and you get $500 worth of modules built into it. It's a pretty cool place to start for somebody that's new, since you're going to need to get those anyway. And then you can just jump right into the fun ones. And then once you want to kind of expand out into more things, you could go to a different case or start adding in the individual modules into that one. And it's got enough space with 104 HP that you've got some room to grow. So I think it's a cool module. Look it up, Nano Modules from Spain, and it's called the Caixa case. That would be my recommendation. It's cool too, because it's 1U without having to go down the road of buying a bunch of 1U modules that you may or may not use. I went that route with a couple of palette cases, and just ended up trading those for a bunch of these modules, because I found I wasn't using the 1U in any of the cases that I had. And so those modules kind of went to waste once I stopped using the palette cases. So yes. Let's see here. Los Angeles, cool. So we've got both coasts of the US. We've got Miami and Los Angeles. I know we have Seattle, because I saw some of my Seattle folks in here. We've got Toronto. We've got Ireland. Don't know where else we got. Let's see, anything you used live in the past, like hybrid able DJing or Tractor with Model 1 mixer. Yeah, I mean, you want to use an analog audio card, yes, you're going to get good sound that will come out of it. Conversion is going to be great. What do you think about using a DJ mixer to mix down everything to it? Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the no mixer, end of chain device, piece of hardware, laptop, anything is going to be able to keep up with you in mixing and mastering while you perform live if you're actually doing things live. Everything you do live will change your mix and master, and there's nothing that I've seen that will keep up with you. So that said, it doesn't matter if it's an analog heat, if it's your laptop running Ableton, if it's a Model 1 mixer, if it's a Pioneer V10 mixer, if it is it doesn't matter. None of it will replace you actually mixing the sounds you're doing. And you know the old adage, if you're a producer, you've heard the old adage that you can't polish a turd, so if you don't mix it correctly, you can't master to fix it. It's never been more true than in the world of live performance. So you have to physically mix your music, choose the right sounds, filter them correctly, bring them in at the right levels, and do all of that stuff. And in that case, all you really need is kind of what you would get from any of these end of chain things, whether it's an auto boom or an analog heat or something like that, that would just add some saturation to thicken it up, a bit of drive, and a tiny little bit of filtering at the end. And that's really all you're gonna be able to get out of it and have it kind of keep up with what you're doing as you perform live. So let's see, Nicole Modular, Paco, Suna, etc. use external processing after the PC. But yeah, I mean, and that's a conversion thing because they're trying to get things out because they're both playing with laptops. So they're trying to get something that gets a little bit more power and sounds a little bit more natural when you're playing with Traktor and or Ableton in a laptop. Thanks, tons of knowledge. I'm glad you like it. That's what these are for. And again, I will asterisk all of this by saying this is all just what I think, and there is no right answer. I say this a lot, but there's no rules to this. Like, you do whatever you want. The only rule at the end of the day is, does it sound good? Do you personally like the way it sounds? I don't know if you've read Rick Rubin's book that just came out this year, but he had this controversial thing that he said in an interview that he has in the book as well, which says that that the audience comes last. And controversial for DJs because your idea is to make people have fun. But at the end of the day, when you're making music, whether you're performing live, whether you're producing, whatever, you need to make stuff you love. And that's, I think, what he was trying to say out of that. Make things that you love. And if you love the way something sounds and you have these totally screwed up settings, weird compression, weird levels, things that are clipping and overdriven, if you like the way it sounds, that's all that matters. There are no rules that aren't made to be broken. So, and especially with techno music that I make, because the whole idea of techno music is to be experimental and with your sounds and all of that stuff. So there's not any rules. So if there are rules, break them or throw them out the window or whatever. There's not any rules. So the only rule is, does it sound good? Let's see. Put a lot of things into perspective as far as live mastering. I was trying different stuff, but now, yeah, it's. I hope I can save you some time. That's another reason why I did this channel, was I wanted to put out there information that I wish was out there. People could have saved me years of my life had they said what I just said, that it doesn't, no matter what any gear nerd says, there are no rules. They're going to say, oh, you have to have whatever cables, whatever compressor, you have to use outboard, you have to use in the box, out of the box, modular, hardware. It's all bullshit. Honestly, there are no rules. Like the rule at the end of the day is, does it sound good? And I would add, for me personally, again, the only other rule that I would add to the game is, do you have a ton of fun doing it? And for me, using a laptop is not fun. So, I'm a consultant during the day. I look at spreadsheets all day long. I am constantly on my computer. Laptops are no fun. So I want to keep that as far away. Like when I was DJing, I kept it, I used Traktor for a while and would try to keep the computer as far away as I could and just use controllers. But I was much more into DJing, whether it was with vinyl or CDJs or whatever, because I just don't want to spend any more time than I have to on the computer. Same goes production-wise. That's why I have this. Even though this is running Ableton over here on the side, it's running Ableton so that I don't have to look at Ableton and use the mouse and click and do all of that stuff. I have my mouse here that you can see on the screen, but that's so that I can do things with the live stream, but trying to keep it as far away from me as I possibly can. So you could have saved me years of my life if you would have just said, you know, do what's fun, do what you enjoy, and there's not any rules except make it sound good. Like, that's, at the end of the day, the only thing that's important is does it sound good? So let's see here. Rethinking my setup, and I'm thinking of an Oberheim OBX8 module for analog, my Peak for wavetable, and Phantom for everything else. I mean, those are, all three of those are fantastic synthesizers. So I would, again, piggybacking on what I just said, do you have tons of fun playing those instruments? And does it sound the way you want it to sound? Does it sound good to you when it comes out? If that's the case, use that. And if you can get that sound and that amount of fun from things that cost a tenth what those cost, do that. And it all comes down to you. Like, I use the Elektron machines because I love the workflow. I really love playing them. I love how immediate I can get with them. I love how quick I am on them. I love the Percons. That's why it's here. You'll notice, and you've heard me, if you've watched any of these videos, you've heard me rip on the Roland workflow and what a convoluted, painful workflow it is. You'll notice I have a Roland synth right here. And the reason why it's this one and not other synths is because of this workflow. The fact that everything is immediate, hands-on, you can see it right in front of you. And so for me, that's like a modular synth in a box that you can actually physically, I can look at that before I press on the key and know what it's going to sound like, because I can see how the oscillators are set. I can see which oscillators are brought in. I can see, you know, what the envelope settings are. So I know before I play it what it's going to sound like. And I love that. And so again, it has to be something you love playing. The Peak is kind of on my short list of synths that I will get when I, you know, when I win the lottery, or when money's, you know, I've plenty of money wrapped up in what I have right here. It hasn't floated to the top of the list yet, but it's one of those synths that I really love. So I think, yeah, it's fantastic. Same with the Oberheim. If the Oberheim, if you like that sound, it's amazing. It's not for everybody. The Oberheim sound is not something that would fit with what I do. Just like you'll notice that you don't see any prophets in this room, because no matter what amazing synths they are, they don't necessarily fit with what I'm doing. But that doesn't mean that they're not amazing for somebody else. And so it really has to come down to what fits with what you want the sound to be and what you really love to play. And you know, have a great time playing, and that should be the deciding factor in all of this. Do you have a great time playing it, and does it sound the way you want it to coming out? All right, let's see here. Cool. Thanks for all the questions, by the way. I love this. This is kind of the most fun part, is chatting about stuff and getting other people's inputs and giving my opinions when people ask for them. Yeah, I mean, amalgamod cases are great, but they're wicked expensive for a beginner, and that's probably way overkill. But you know, eventually you might want to go down that route. And again, I would say something like an amalgamod, it kind of comes down to, are you going to be taking it out to play live? Are you going to be, do you want it just for a home system? You know, you don't need that. If you are going to be taking it live, are you going to be taking it on a plane? Amalgamad's going to be a problem. Getting it onto a lot of planes, depending on where you're going to travel to. So it all kind of depends. Again, it comes down to your use case. There's not one answer like this is the thing. It's like it all depends on what you're gonna do with it. Let's see here. Would like to know, why did you choose the OXI One for live melody sequencing over something like the Torso T1? So Torso T1 is another fantastic sequencer, which does a lot of really cool things. The OXI One, and if there's Torso users out there and I'm saying something that doesn't make any sense, pop that into the chat, because I haven't used it as extensively as I would like to. But the OXI One basically does everything that the Torso can do, plus a ton more. The Torso has 16 tracks, for example, of sequencing that you can do. The OXI One has 4 sequencers, each of which can be set up to be an 8-track multi-sequencer. So you can ultimately have 32 tracks of sequencing coming out of the OXI One. The Torso T1 has 16 channels of MIDI that it can sequence out, or also CV gate. I think it has 8 and 8, just like the OXI One. So the OXI One has 8 CV and 8 gates out, but it also has, for MIDI sequencing, it has 1 through 16A, 1 through 16B, 1 through 16C. So you have 48 channels of outgoing MIDI, 32 channels of sequencing, plus 8 CV and 8 gate outputs. Plus it has Bluetooth MIDI, TRS MIDI, USB-C MIDI, and what else? I can't remember what else MIDI. And battery powered and all of that stuff. So again, the T1 is a great sequencer, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not putting that down at all. Just for me, this does a lot more. And I also like the interface of this a lot. I'm also a huge fan of Manuel, the guy who started this company. How responsive he is to the people that use his product. I mean, he's done, I don't know, for any of the OXI users out there, how many updates has he done? He's probably done, no joke, 4 or 5 updates just this year. And substantial updates, with everything from new features, totally new types of sequencers, new layouts. Just recently he just added something like the backlights on the buttons to be able to adjust those, to set those. He's changed up the way that you can do mutes and unmutes. You can have them either quantized or immediate. You can have all these different settings to really customize it to the way that you like to work. So again, for me, this is the best sequencer that there is. And I've used the T1, I've used the Hapex, I've used the Squid, I've used the Circlon. And for me, there's nothing that compares to this one. I just think that this is the best sequencer out there. But again, for me. So other people gel with other workflows better. And I would say if you find something that works better for you, get that and don't get this. For me, I've tried all those and this is the one that worked best for me. I would say, you'll notice there's another sequencer right here in my modular case, which is the Metron, which is probably my favorite modular sequencer, although I'm hoping to try the vector sequencer, because he just did a Mark II that's coming out right now, which I'm excited to try because it looks really interesting. And I'm kind of a geek for sequencers, so I can't wait to try that one. So anyway, that's why I use the OXI instead of the T1. Interesting thing about the heat. Could you do that with Digitakt pattern change? Yeah, I mean, it's basically, the heat has MIDI in and out, so you could send program change from any device. It doesn't have to be an Elektron device, but it obviously works really well with the Elektron devices, and it's very fast and it's a tight integration. So if you're doing the type of live performance where you have tracks prepared and then you do a program change to go to your next track with your next set of presets and your next set, sequences and things like that, you could include a program change message being sent to the heat to change to the next preset. So you could have every track mastered differently within the heat. Let's see. You're welcome for the perspective. And again, it is just my perspective. So I know sometimes I get like, this is the way it is, but I don't mean that at all. It's not, I'm I'm not by any means saying that this is the way it has to be. I'm just saying from my experience, this is what I've found, and hopefully I can save you guys some brain damage. Let's see, preference of synths versus samples, if you had to pick one. I am a synth guy, but I have to say, the Digitakt 2 has got me exploring samples more than I ever have in my life. This goes back to my day job, being a consultant. I'm constantly in my computer, in my Outlook and files and all that stuff. And samples to me feel like work, because the whole sample management thing and files and folders and managing that stuff, I don't like. And so because of that, I have not ever been a sample person. Now with the Digitakt 2, the ease of being able to sample in, rename your samples and manage them internally, I like. I also like that they added so much space for samples that I don't feel like I'm constantly having to like load and make space and then load new samples and change things around. And I feel like I can kind of come up with the samples that I love, keep those in the Digitakt 2, and then use the rest of the space for actual sampling within it. And with that, it sounds very interesting. I hope they fix some of the sample editing capability. I don't like that the grid is just a grid and you can't change the start and end points of individual slices like you can in the Octatrack. I wish that would come to this, and maybe it will at some point. But yeah, I'm definitely a synth over sample person, but I get the sample workflow, because there's a thing for me that I like immediacy. I like when I'm producing and when I'm playing live, I like the idea of make quick decisions and move on. That's why I think that live performance really helps with production as well, because it teaches you to make decisions and then just move on. Because you can't kind of go back and redo things 25 times in front of a crowd, so you have to do it. So I like that about samples, that if you've got samples that you love, like for example, if you've got a TR-8S and you've got it set up with a bank of drums that you like and you don't ever change them out, that's awesome. Just use that and have those be your drums that you always go back to. I think that's very cool. But yeah, again, a personal preference thing. I like making sounds. I can make them faster than I can find them in a file tree of samples, going through and listening to 25 different kicks, or 2,500 different kicks before I find the right one. I could just make the kick I like. So, all right, let's see here. Don't own the heat. But a good feature to consider. Yeah, and I would say if it's just going to be as kind of an end of chain thing, get an analog heat Mark 1. You can get them really cheap. I mean, now that there's the Mark 2 and then the heat plus effects, I think the Mark 1s, you can find them used for like $350. And that has 90% of what you'll use as that end of chain thing. It has everything that the Mark 2 had. It didn't have things like the envelope follower and stuff, but if you're not using that, if you're just using it as an end of chain, get a Mark 1. You don't even need the Mark 2, much less the heat plus effects. So that's a very quick, easy way to kind of get in the door with that thing. What the heck? How did that happen? All right. Let's see here. Barcelona, Spain. Cool. One of my favorite cities in the whole world. I love Barcelona. I love the Boqueria market. I could spend days there. It's amazing. Yeah, I love Barca. And I'm a huge Barca soccer fan. So I feel like modular mixers lack a good EQ section. Yes, I agree with you. They do. But again, it's saving space. There are a few of the more recent mixers that came out that have EQing that they've used well, or that they've implemented well. But yeah, it hasn't been a big thing, but it's been a space-saving thing, I think, in a lot of modular mixers. Yeah, that's why a lot of people you see that are doing live hardware are using DJ mixers, because they want to have that ability to EQ. But again, it's a trade-off. In order to get that with a DJ mixer, you're going to take a 30-pound mixer with you when you travel, or if you're good enough, you can have something on a rider. And then you still have to set it up the way you want it when you get there. And, if you're going to use a Pioneer mixer, or if you're going to use the sends from Allen and Heath, and then you've got cabling to go to outboard pedals and things like that. So there's a lot of trade-offs in order to just get an EQ. But that's, again, up to your preference. So let's see here. Spitting facts for real. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm all about spitting facts for real. 5 years ago, you would hardly find videos at all on how to use your Eurorack modules. People lost a lot of money. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, when I first got into Eurorack, I've only been in the Eurorack modular thing for a couple of years. And when I first started out, I got so overwhelmed instantly that the first thing that I had to do was reach out to friends who were into Eurorack. So I reached out to a bunch of fellow YouTuber friends. Ihor helped me a ton. Travarsi helped me a ton. So they got back, and Travarsi actually, the Metron sequencer, I was originally looking at the Erica Synths, not the drum sequencer, but I think it's the black sequencer, because I liked that it was kind of like, you could set things individual by track and things like that. And she kind of said right away, she said, no, you're an Elektron guy. Your head works Elektron wise, get the Metron. And I did, and instantly fell in love with it. She was 100% correct that it was exactly the right fit for me. But yeah, it's super overwhelming, the amount of modules that are out there. And again, because it's modular, there's so many workflows that you can't just say, I don't know, if it's already hard to decide what car to buy, because it's well, how are you going to use it? Do you have kids? Are you going off-road? Do you want to go fast? Do you commute? Are you looking for gas mileage? Whatever. With modules, every single module has so many different things that it can do and different ways that you can use it, that when I kind of came up with my list of what I wanted to put into this case, I was like, okay, these are the voices I already have. What am I missing? I want something that's additive. So then I started going down the road, narrowing it down. What are the additive synths that are out there? What are the best ones that do what I want to do? What are the ones that have a lot of flexibility for creative sound design? Then I was like, okay, now I want a complex oscillator. And I started going down that road and ended up with the DPO. But it was very much the same with all of this, was looking at, what did I want to use it for? And that's what kind of helped me narrow it down, because there's just not any one answer about what's the best thing. So let's see, how do you deal with the logistical nightmare and stress of setting up live gear in a DJ booth next to DJs? Well, after having DJed for 30 years, being in a DJ booth next to DJs doesn't really stress me out, because whatever, I've been there long enough to deal with it. One thing I can say, and I don't think this gets brought up enough, but take apart and put together your gear a lot at home. Get used to tearing it all apart and then putting it all back together again. And if you really want to get specific about it, do it in the dark or with really low light. And it's the only way you're gonna be like, oh my God, all of these look the same in the dark. I need different colored cables, or all of this looks whatever. So get used to it before you get in that situation. There's a really funny quote from Surgeon when he's talking about playing live, and I think he calls it the 50% stupid rule or whatever. And he says, basically, when you're in a dark room with loud music and flashing lights and stuff, you're gonna be 50% dumber or less, efficient or less good at what you do. So dumb everything down for dumb you to do in front of those people. And that goes for setting up and breaking down. So having the right cables, simplifying your setup as much as possible, and practice setting it up, practice breaking it down, do that stuff so that you don't freak out. If you're prepared, you won't stress. Stress is a function of lack of preparation. So the more prepared you are, it's not saying you won't have any stress, but you will have increasingly more stress equivalent to your lack of preparation. So the more times you've set up and broken down, the less stressful setting up and breaking down will be. So set up and break down, practice. It will help. Let's see. The TE05 overhead, that thing looks really cool. I didn't mess around with that. I should have at Superbooth, but it looked really cool. Let's see, if you're gonna have an effects unit like the Eventide H90 permanently in line with the X8, what baseline effect would you use as a starting point? I don't know because again, it's going to come down to how you're going to use it and what you want as the ending sound. That's one reason why I set up this the way I did with multiple units that do multiple things. Because like, for example, if I just want to send something only through the Ghost, so this is just going through the Ghost, right? But the Ghost has a delay, a reverb, a filter, a distortion, an overdrive, a compressor. So I could take out the distortion, I could take off the reverb, and I can reduce down the amount of delay, and I can filter up. So that's giving me a very different sound than if I add in reverb, and then I added distortion, and I increase the amount I'm sending the delay. So that's all still that one sound going through that one module. So for me, that's a multi-effects unit. You know, yeah, an H90 or an H9, like they're their own things as well, and they're kind of like, it's kind of like the analog heat plus effects. You've got like chains of effects that you can add together. So I guess the answer for me is that it really depends on what you're doing with it. You know, like if I tend with the Ghost in my live setup, I keep it in my live rig, and that it tends to just add atmosphere. So I actually have settings that I like that are all of those things together, which sounds a bit like, kind of go back to my normal setting here. So it would sound a bit like this. Because I like how that adds atmosphere, and I'm not treating it as an effect, I'm using it as an atmosphere, right? And then I filter sweep. So that impacts that kind of atmospheric thing. So I use that to create atmospheres live while I'm playing based on what's going through it. And I have it, when I play live, that's on a send from the mixer. So I can send whatever I want from it, or from my mix to it. And I kind of play it as another voice. So yeah, so that for me is kind of that one. It's not, there's not like kind of a set preset. Now, again, with delays, for example, I like to use delays in combination. So if I was going to take, again, let's take out everything except the delay from that. So that's just the delay going through there. But then I would add in something else, like the prism, that also has delay. And then I might add in the Soma with a different delay. So then you kind of combine those delays together. So again, for me, there's not like one setting, like here's the setting I like. It really kind of depends. I use effects as voices and as kind of sculpting elements for the track rather than as kind of one note, this is a delay. I like to use them in combination, but that's me and that's for my sound. So it really kind of depends on what you're going to use. But I would say just get to know your gear. So whichever delays, whichever reverbs, whichever, overdrives or distortions or whatever you're using, just get to know them so that when you go to play live, you know how to kind of dial in those settings really quick to what you want. So that way it'll encourage you to play around a bit with them because you know how to get back to your kind of baseline. So yeah, I would definitely say practice using those a lot. Let's see. I'm not sure when I'm ending either. How long have we been going? It's been a long one. Yeah, almost 3 hours. I will definitely do a jam. Let's see. Analog cases with electron machines. See, it feels like the OXI One gets updates every week. Yes, it does. I mean, if you ever get a chance to meet Manuel, he's awesome. He's an amazing guy. He lives in Galicia in northern Spain, and he basically does two things with his life. He codes and he kite surfs. So he will code until his brain melts, and then he'll go out and kite surf for a couple hours. Then he comes back and he codes. And he's either coding for the OXI One, the OXI Choral, now the Meta, the effects module, which is also awesome. And he's got some other things in the works. So he's just coding all the time and he loves it. He's a musician and he loves coding for music. So yeah, and that's why you get so many updates. Like even the choral, like he's constantly adding new synth voices and new, updates and new effects and new whatever, because he just likes to figure it out. And people will say, oh, I wish it did this. And he'll go, I can come up with a way for it to do that. And then he just, invents something new. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. Getting late here. Oh, awesome. Glad you liked it. Have a good one. And yeah, enjoy. Come back for the next one. Let's see. Join the Circo Discord. Yes. We've got Discord. We've got Patreon, which I just recently fired up, which I had not been doing, but kind of had some life changes that made it important for me to start to work on a bunch of different things. I started my own company, so having different sources of income is important. So yeah, join the Patreon. I do classes. We do group coaching if you want to sign up for that level of the Patreon. I do one-on-ones. You can go to the website. There's merch. There's some cool, shirts and hats and sweatshirts, and there's a jacket. There's some cool notebooks and things like that. So grab those. There's a sample pack. There's going to be a new sample pack coming soon. So keep checking those out. Yeah, so there's all kinds of things that you can do, and jump into the Discord. It's not as active as some of the cool kids on the block, but we're starting to get it built up. And the more of you guys that show up on there, and the more active you are, the more active it'll be. So I try to be as responsive as I can on there as well. Let's see. The Modular is crazy busy. Yeah, it is. Tried any of the other qubit delays or verbs, Aurora, Nautilus. I tried the Nautilus. I haven't tried the Aurora yet. The Nautilus is cool. It was a little too, what's the best way? Too ambient for me. It's it goes really quickly into kind of super flowy sounds, which for the type of music I make, I like things that are a bit more percussive and delay and things like that. So the Prism was a bit better for me, but it was cool. I love the sound of it. It was just not exactly a great fit for me. But yeah, it was. They're pretty cool. So yeah, so let's jam just a little bit more music before we get out of here. So you can see what else do we have going. I'm going to mess around a bit more with let's clear this out of here and start with something new. is what happens when you don't reset your modular sequencer when you restart your MIDI sequencer. That's why. See, one of the beautiful things about all of this stuff is coordinating everything together, sequencing your CV with your MIDI and getting everything to work together. So right now it is not, because I unplugged too many different things, but I will get it sorted back out again. So, anyway, any more questions? Do any of you guys have any more questions on any of this stuff or any of the stuff that we talked about, or I don't know, anything else? We talked about everything we were going to. Studio setup, Elektron drum machines, production modular rig, and OXI One. Yeah, I think we did. Cool. Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. It's always great to have everybody around. And if you come up with any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments of this video, pass the video around, give it likes, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, and if you have any other questions, reach out to me on Instagram or on the Discord or on Patreon or wherever you'd like. I'm usually pretty active on all that stuff. So would love to hear more from you. And if you have other ideas about things that you would like me to cover on any of these videos, or go into more detail on, or kind of walk through, I'm happy to do that. So just reach out and let me know. And the ones that are the most requested, I will do my best to get those into the next one of these videos. But thank you guys very much. It's always great to have everybody around. And